We're so focused on the doing that many of us have forgotten the being. Eckhart Tolle says our life has two different purposes, an inner purpose and an outer purpose. And the inner purpose is simply to awaken. And so many of us focus on the doing and have abandoned or forgotten the being. What if your purpose isn't about the doing at all? It's to simply wake up to the deepest truth of who and what you are, to recognize in a very profound way that love is who you are, Source is who you are, God is who you are. Thank you so much, Betty, for talking about love energy. That was a beautiful way to start the service today. Because what we know now is life is energy, and that matter is actually compressed energy. And what I love that's happening right now on our planet is science, and I'm going to say this very consciously, is starting to catch up with what the mystics and spiritual teachers have been saying for thousands of years. Right? We now are measuring energy and recognizing that this chair is not actually solid, and yet it holds us up. And when I believe my world is solid, then I would probably go the next step, which would be I can't change it. But what we recognize is that life isn't solid at all. And that what we focus on actually comes into manifestation. Quantum mechanics is showing us that. And the mystics and New Thought, ancient wisdom, has been saying it for so long. And that is, I have a choice where I put my focus. And it was so beautiful, your prayer was so beautiful today, Ron, when you were listing what we see in the world and yet what we know from a much deeper level. We are a house with 4 rooms, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And we're in this profound evolution in consciousness that's happening right now, where more and more of us are recognizing that the great reality, the great remembering, is that spiritual room. And when I say spiritual room, it's profoundly simple. We came into this world whole and perfect, precious little spiritual beings. And then we come into our family systems, our school systems, and yes, even many churches, and we get taught something very counter to that. We get taught about all those isms you spoke of. We get taught about our own limitations. We get taught what it means to be a little boy, what it means to be a little girl, what it means to be our race. So the spiritual journey is about returning. It's about coming home to that deeper truth. And for me, this experience is twofold. One, spending time in the silence, remembering that reality. Remembering the truth of who and what we are, and a recognition that as we live in that spiritual room, we actually change our physical environment. And if that feels a little bit too much, if that's a little bit too much of a stretch, we can say when we make a deep connection with the bedrock of our being, that essential truth, our perception of reality changes, and therefore our experience of the world changes. So I said it's a twofold process. The second process for me is I have to unlearn just about everything I've ever been taught on planet Earth.
Yeah.
That's an easy task. So that particular process can take a lifetime, and it can happen in an instant. And that instant is simply a recognition that I have been run by the BS belief systems that I inherited, and evidence is now showing us, right? Again, science is now showing us that we carry the trauma of our family 7 generations back. So that's about 140 to 200 years, roughly. Think about that for a moment, what was happening in our consciousness back then, and that we inherit that. And the great news is, because we now understand that we have the power to choose, we can actually change that. Yes, I can go back and actually change the past. What do you think of that? And I'm going to go a little deeper into that. I want to talk about shame and how shame gets passed down from generation to generation. My grandmother was born, I believe, in the very early 1900s, and she had a gay brother. Right? Back then, that's how you talked about it. But no one talked about it, and they didn't call him that because it completely was not okay. And yet he had a male partner, and we called them both uncle. That's confusing. I remember being a really little kid, maybe 6 or 7, and I remember being at a family gathering, and he walked into the room, and I remember running over to him with enthusiasm and hugging him, and he pushed me away and said, "Boys don't hug men like that." Because his own internalized shame was passed down to me in that moment. And I remember feeling the energy of that. And I didn't understand all of that yet, but energetically, I got it. I took it on. And so that experience, along with countless other experiences, caused me to believe a lie. Because anything other than you're a whole and perfect spiritual being isn't the truth. How many people in school on day 1 of kindergarten were told, "You are a perfect child. You are love and life. You are joy itself. You are a beautiful spiritual being"? I don't know. If you went to that school, I want to know about it. My best friend Lisa, her daughter grew up in Unity. And it's the closest I've ever seen to that. Because from a very, very early age, she spoke the truth to her child. You are whole and perfect in every way. You are a loving being. You are source energy. I watched her grow up, and I thought this was going to be fun to see in a tangible way the impact of that. She's grown up to be this beautiful being of light. So some of us have less to unlearn. Some of us have a lot to unlearn. So what I'm talking about today is the energizing power of purpose. And if we recognize that our true purpose is simply to awaken to a greater reality, to the truth, the great remembering, returning to that source energy, we recognize that that is incredibly energizing. Because when I focus on the events of the world, what happens to my energy? Well, it depends on what I'm focusing on. There's so much love in the world. And so I want to speak for a moment about one of my favorite topics, and that is evidence and conclusion. Most of us believe that we come to a conclusion by gathering evidence, right? But what if it's the other way around? What if I'm holding a conclusion about myself and the world, and therefore I'm finding the evidence to support that conclusion? This is usually not conscious, by the way. If I believe the world is kind and loving, can I find evidence to support that? If I believe the world is brutal and hostile, can I find evidence to support that? I'm not saying let's all pretend like this isn't happening. What I'm saying is when I put my energy on the love that's happening in the world and the love energy that I am, I become energized and therefore a beneficial presence on the planet. Because what the world needs right now is each of us to wake up to that greater reality. Lao Tzu, 2,500 years ago, said it very simply, and it applies right now. The greatest gift you can offer the world is that of your own transformation. I haven't forgotten that I said we can change the past. I'm going to come back to that. Another way to say it is, it's never too late to have a happy childhood. And I'm going to say why. It's not what happened, it's what I decided about what happened that creates what I call reality. When I was early in my spiritual journey, I remember pretty obsessively wanting to go back to the past and figure out what happened. And I was calling my sisters, "Do you remember this event? Do you remember that?" And what I discovered, because we might say, well, we all had different versions of the story. But the reality is we all had completely different stories. And I mean, they couldn't even be, they're not even, sometimes not even similar. I had an idea that Dad wasn't there for me. I had an idea that Dad was never home. I had an idea that Dad wasn't a loving man. Those were my ideas about him, and therefore I made a lot of decisions about myself, about men, and about the world based on that. My younger sister, when I asked her about our childhood, she said, "Isn't it amazing we had the most present and loving father?" So it's really not what happened. It's what I experienced and what I believed about what happened that creates the core vibration that I'm holding about myself. And when I'm carrying a core vibration of unlovability, because that's what I decided, Dad wasn't there for me, I must be unlovable. A little kid's brain doesn't understand a lot of nuance. Good and bad. If something bad happens to me, I must have done something wrong. So how do we change the past? Literally, change the past. We don't even know if it ever happened. I want to be really clear about something. I'm not trying to minimize any kind of traumatic experience from the past. And I'm not saying that we want to pretend like it didn't happen. But what I recognize is that forgiveness is a shift in consciousness. It's not about the other person. It's about changing how I have perceived that and the core ideas about myself that I have concretized into my unconscious. Because at Unity we talk about thoughts held in mind create after their kind, but I really think that it's far more than that. It's the emotional center as well. I think it's far more than that. It's the core vibration that I'm holding, and we recognize that frequency always matches frequency. So in a tangible way, I was walking around because I had decided that Dad wasn't there for me, therefore I'm unlovable. I was walking around vibrating, I'm not lovable. All I wanted was someone to love me. So I was, please love me, please love me, please love me. But who do you think I was choosing? People who couldn't love me the way I thought I needed it. Because the core vibration is, this is what I'm worthy of, unlovability. And when someone would come along, any type of relationship that was really there for me and loving, what do you think I did? I pushed them away. Like a magnet that gets turned. So this journey of the awakening isn't at all about, oh yeah, I can say it that way. It really ultimately isn't all about the physical realm. Because as we say in Unity, there is relative reality and ultimate reality. Relative reality is where we say the only thing constant is change. The world is changing, people make their transition. We allow ourselves to grieve, to honor that person. And yet we know in relative reality that's part of it. People come and go. This community will have new people, some people will leave, people will move away. In relative reality, it's always changing. And if I haven't awakened to my true nature, that can be a very painful experience. Another way to say it is, if your peace is dependent upon who's in the White House, you will suffer. And see, someone across the street is suffering in the exact opposite way. I can't believe she's in the White House. I can't believe he's in the White House. I have to suffer or I have to fight. Because we need to change this. So what I want to say about that is that it's not this or that, it's this and that. But it starts with the beingness. And as I am in the beingness, conscious being leads to conscious doing. So I want to share a story about how this really works and how it can be really energizing rather than depleting. Two stories, actually. One, I have the honor of working in the addiction treatment field. This is a field where many people get burnt out. Because, as my friend said, how do you do that? How do you do that work? It has such a low success rate and people die and it's so painful. If I am not deeply connected with my spiritual essence, I will be drained by that. When I know who and what I am, I get to hold a space for someone else to know who and what they are. I don't do it, but I create the space. And the observer has a profound effect. So if I'm in the room diagnosing or looking for what's wrong, there's a higher probability that we'll find it. And the person that I'm sitting with has been told multiple times that there's something wrong with them. And they probably believe very deeply there's something wrong with them. So I can be energized by that work because I'm not as attached to the outcome or the physical manifestation as I once was. And to me, it's a practice. There's not a finish line. So if I notice I'm starting to feel drained, I just check in with myself. Oh, wow, I really want him to change right now. What could be more futile than wanting another person to do it my way? And how many decades did I spend doing that? I'll tell you. It wasn't until I was 40 where I was like, oh my gosh, I can't, I've got to let this go. Because it's so draining. So the energizing power of purpose is to simply recognize that my only real purpose is to know that deep truth. As Michael Beckwith says, to have an intimate relationship with our true nature. There's another story that I don't know where it went. So that's okay. My invitation for each of us is to take a look at all of those programs that we have been given and to feel the energy of those programs. Some of those things we were told, whether they were overt or covert, the ideas that were passed down from generation to generation, the belief in our own unworthiness, in our not enoughness. And simply feel the energy of that. Can you feel that? And I always ask the question, what would it be like to be free? What would it feel like? What would that vibration feel like to be free of that? See, here's the great news. I don't have to change my story. I can live beyond it. So when I say we can go back and change the past, I can simply recognize, sure, on one level of reality, this is what happened, this is what I decided, this is what the world is, but there's a whole different level of awareness that we can drop into that will create a powerful shift, not only in our individual lives, but in the world. Going back to the greatest gift I can offer the world is that of my own transformation. The greatest gift I can offer the world is my own knowing of who and what I am. There are people who say new thought is selfish because we talk a lot about the self and the transformation of self. There isn't as much focus about what we're doing in the world. That's shifting some in New Thought. There is more of that now. Agape in Los Angeles I want to honor because they do a lot in the world. They do a lot in the world. I know Brentwood Unity, you do a lot in the world. But what we want to be really aware of, what I want to be really aware of, is when I'm doing something in the world, how am I being in the midst of that doing? Because if I'm there to solve a problem or to fix a broken system, or I'm there to help that poor person, I've got to help them, what am I creating? Dependence. I'm creating more of what is keeping that person feeling small anyway. And there's one humanity here. We're all one. What is it to really know that? To really know that we're all perfect expressions of the one power, perfect emanation. To me, that's the Big Bang. Source, boom. I've spent a lot of years trying to figure out why we're here. I spent a lot of years trying to figure out what I believe. And I recognize that that matters far less. And it's more about how I am with myself. How I am with the world, always starting. And this is why I think New Thought is not selfish at all. I actually think it is what the world needs. And that is, as I am liberated, as Marianne Williamson says, as I am liberated, I naturally create a space for others to be liberated. When I know my own light, others can experience that. So, would you like your life to be energizing? Would you like to know beyond a shadow of a doubt that love is who you are? Would you like to be a beneficial presence on the planet? It can happen right in this moment. It's a simple shift, a shift in awareness. Because see, I don't grow spiritually. I grow in awareness of the truth of who and what I already am. Each of us already is that we're seeking. Everything I've ever sought from the world is already within me. And when I don't know who and what I am, and I believe in my own brokenness, I'm going to look to the world to try to bring me what I think I need. Do you hear the cycle? I'm broken, please fix me. Those are some fun relationships, aren't they? Or Jan says, or you're broken and I'll fix you. Oh, that one's even more fun. Oh gosh, I just had a moment. I've been in that relationship. He didn't appreciate it. He said, I'll see you later. Because what I was trying to heal, and this is what I want to say in closing, and if you know me well, when I say in closing, usually it's 5 more minutes. Everything I'm trying to fix in the world is really me wanting to heal myself. And we're moving into a paradigm now where we're moving and shifting into a new awareness that it's not that we're spiritual beings having a human experience, it's that we're spiritual beings having a spiritual experience. And the reason I say it that way is very conscious, because I have lived in the duality of this is my human self and this is my spiritual self. That story came back to me. So how do we tap into an intuitive awareness and follow that deep intuition? Because that's really what we're talking about here. I'm talking about not being run by the program of my mind or even the program of my emotion. Because how many times have we said, I'm having a negative emotion? There's no such thing. How's that for some freedom? Whatever I'm feeling is okay. It's information. Feelings are an internal navigation system letting us know something needs attention. They're not wrong or good or bad. They're not positive or negative. They're information. So as we do this work of unlearning, and as we practice, because it's a spiritual practice, moment by moment, not a finish line, because I wanted a finish line. I thought it would have happened 20 years ago too, by the way. But it's a process of constantly practicing the presence, practicing that the purpose is within. And it's had profound results in my life, and I want to share a couple of things that have been happening for me, and it's because I have learned to trust the intuition, I end up making decisions that my mind doesn't want to make. Like I did resign as the senior minister of Agape Bay Area because that's what the inner knowing was telling me to do. This is what my head was telling me. Are you kidding? After 7 years of building that community and it's finally vibrant and all these amazing things are happening, now you're going to leave? But the internal voice, that knowing, that place where I really got quiet and listened, sometimes it actually is a voice. Resign your position. Usually it's more of an internal knowing. That's how I got into ministry. I spent a year saying no to the inner voice. And then I finally said yes. And in that same way, what I've come to understand is I don't have to figure anything out, and I don't have to have the logical 3-month, 6-month, and 3-year plan, because I know when I trust this, it always leads me in the direction that will allow me to flourish and serve the world. And it's 100% of the time. So in the last three weeks, and in the last 2 months, I have let go of 3 different things in my life. Not because that was a great idea, but because it was an internal knowing. And this is honestly how it looks for me. Hopefully you'll relate to this. The knowing is there. My voice usually says, that's a great idea, or that's a terrible idea, right? It's always judging. And asking the mind to stop judging is asking like the lungs to stop breathing or the heart to stop pumping blood. So thank you, mind. I know you have a perspective here. I know that I know that I know. Right? And I have come to trust making decisions from that place instead of this one. And because of that, because sometimes we have to have the sacred no. The sacred no to something in our life that might be really comfortable. And what do we know about the comfort zone? It feels really good, but nothing changes as long as I'm in it. It feels really good. And it doesn't mean I'm supposed to always be uncomfortable. Well, maybe. But I want to spend some time pushing that comfort zone, right? Allowing myself to, because that's consciousness in the human realm, or as I said, the spiritual realm. I can see more, I can understand more. There are infinite possibilities in every situation and every moment. The only thing that limits it is my idea about it. It's this. This is what I deserve. This is how much I can do. And what I have found is there is boundless energy in living in the question, what else is possible? In living in the knowing that there are infinite possibilities, and that as I say yes, as I open up, as I trust the inner voice, profound things happen in the outer realm. So everything I was ever seeking in the outer realm does start to happen. But it didn't happen from the outside in, it happens from the inside out. And what happens then too is I'm not clinging or averting. And then some moments I am. Some moments like, oh, I need this to, oh yeah, oh. Return to center. Return to center. That's depleting. This is energizing. Sometimes it's so profoundly simple. What brings you joy? What brings you that effervescent energy? Do more of that. Be more of that. What if we didn't have to figure anything out ever again? What if we didn't? Just know who we are, know what we are. So you are love, you are light, you are joy, you are God and Goddess expressing. Know that. Be that. Life is a great experiment. Are you willing to commit to this?
Yes.
Are you willing to be the love that you are for the rest of today? And if, why not? I love that. Why not? Right? Because we know what happens when we believe the program. I already know that one. That one's the comfortable one. So we're going to live in this love and light. We're going to live knowing this is who and what we are, and we're going to see what happens. Because it's an experiment, and it's an exciting journey that is very energizing. Every glance makes a difference. And I have glanced with love, and I have glanced with judgment. Judgment creates separation. Love creates connection. I'm deeply honored to be here. I just want to share how grateful I am for this particular community and the love that I feel every time I walk in. Peace and blessings.